Yeah, it was
And
fun.
what happened?
What happened? It was so funny because it's literally my last day of work. I'm like, I'm almost
That was your
done.
last day?
It was my last day of work. And it wasn't a task that I did very often, but there was this big metal press. So I have these sheets, like thin sheets of metal. So there's this big, I don't know, sharp shear, that comes down and cuts off. And it's getting smaller as you're cutting the pieces. And then it gets to the point where I had my hands clear of them. And then as I pushed the pedal, I felt a pinch. And I like pulled my hand back and I'm like, shit, what was that? I was like, that was so close. I was like, I almost like really badly hurt myself. And then I look at my hand, just go into total shock. I didn't know what to do. I just started wandering around. And then I was looking for my uncle. And then when I found him and he looks at me and I was probably like white as a sheet. And he's like, are you okay? And I just like held up my hand and he's like, oh my gosh. He like grabs me. We went to the clinic.
Welcome to another episode of Efficient by Design podcast. My name is Luke, the host, and today I have two wonderful guests with me. We have Christy and Erin, and they both work with me in the leather shop. I should more so now actually work with each other, and not as much with me. Although I'm trying to change that. I'm trying to get back there more.
Yes,
yeah.
Weird. Yeah.
So Erin and Christy both joined me in the production shop in the spring, summer of 2020. I had to ask because I don't remember the stuff at all.
Okay.
And their current roles right now, so Christy is kind of shop manager, supervisor, and so you head up all of the safety stuff and help kind of manage staff and work with some of the other managers that have kind of we designated and defined roles for. And Erin, you have basically been, since the beginning actually, but it's become far more defined. You've been kind of heading up and in charge of cutting and laying out of all the materials.
She kind of keeps track of all the inventory and
inventory tracking.
Keeps us busy.
Yeah,
I try.
Very busy. It's great. So you guys are very much in charge in your domains. which is great.
Collaboration.
So let's step back a bunch and kind of go through you guys' previous endeavors, careers, and things, so we can kind of get back up to the start of when you joined Akribis. So Christy, let's start with you because you and I have a history that goes back actually a long time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how much time do we have? It's like 20 plus years of
98,
99. Yeah. Weren't you gone like the first year that I was at school?
Yeah.
I think you were away.
Yeah, I think I was off in Europe and stuff there.
Yeah. So I think I met you the same year that I met Dustin.
Right. And for context, so Dustin, who is oftentimes my co-host as well, is Christy's husband. So basically I got to know them, in the late 90s. They got to know each other.
Yeah.
Married, kids.
Yeah.
So obviously you're having kids and all that. Actually, we go back before then. You have some like industrial experience a little bit. So explain that a little bit.
It's true. It was one of my first jobs as a late teenager. And then kind of between the years that I was at Cape and Ray, I worked at my dad. So my grandfather started a company with his brothers way back in the 70s, 80s. And they manufacture like truck bodies. And so their company has expanded into, I think they have a plant in Langley and then in Coaldale, Alberta. And they've had other ones over the years that they've so those are their main ones. And so in the summer, I worked in their electrical department. And one of my jobs was to wire the sort of like cab chassis to the box.
Okay.
And so I would go underneath and I'd have like my little solder gun and my like roll of whatever metal wire and get the brake lights wired in. And it's so funny to think back now. I'm like, I couldn't remember how to do it, but I was like the only female in this like huge crew of, middle-aged dudes. Yeah. And they were very protective of me. And
it was ITB?
ITB, Intercontinental Truck Body. So you can look them up. They're a pretty big company now.
Yeah. And if if I can remember correctly, it was a kind of a unique assembly of the cube van portion, right?
Yeah, so the panels of the cube van, there's kind of like a trademark way that they do it where they interlock,
right.
whereas like they used to just rivet them.
Yeah,
And
all
then
the panels are riveted together,
panels are
and so
riveted.
there's no exposed fasteners on those.
Exactly. So they look really clean and they're really sturdy. They'll last forever.
They're from Europe, aren't they? They're presses and machinery. Wasn't it brought in from overseas, I thought?
I think so. You'd have
There's
to
something
ask my
about
dad.
Okay. So you're working in an industrial kind of facility with a bunch of
guys.
Dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great. Yeah, it was
and
fun.
what happened?
What happened? It was so funny because it's literally my last day of work. I'm like, I'm almost
That was your
done.
last day?
It was my last day of work. And one of the things, and it wasn't a task that I did very often, but there was this big...
You're 18?
19.
19, okay.
19, so young. It's like a big metal press. So I have these sheets, like thin sheets of metal, aluminum, I think. And you lay it on this tabletop and you're pushing it through and you're cutting off pieces. So there's this big, I don't know, sharp shear, that comes down and cuts off. So you have it set and it'll hit the end and it'll cut off whatever portion size you need. And so I was doing it and it's getting smaller as you're cutting the pieces. And then it gets to the point where they have these like metal plungers that kind of like go down as you push a foot pedal. Mm-hmm. And so you have to obviously keep your hands clear of you'd have to really work hard to get your hand to where the shear is, but then there's these metal plungers or rubber, I can't remember. And so I had my hands clear of them and my foot wasn't on the pedal. So I looked to see where my foot was and I didn't realize my hand moved. And then as I pushed the pedal, I felt a pinch and I pulled my hand back and I was like, shit. What was that? I was like, that was so close. I was like, I almost really badly hurt myself. And then I look at my hand and I don't know how else to describe it. It just looked like a hot dog with a little white bone sticking out the end. And I took they called it a degloving. So I didn't break the bone, but it took the skin and my nail off right there. And it was just.
At the knuckle?
No, the first knuckle. Yeah.
First knuckle.
Totally gone.
Oh my goodness.
And so I'm just looking at it. Just going to total shock. I didn't know what to do. I just started wandering around. And then I was looking for my uncle who was my supervisor.
Was it bleeding a lot?
No, it wasn't. It was really weird. And then when I found him, he was doing something and he looks at me and I was probably white as a sheet. And he's like, are you okay? And I just held up my hand and he's like, oh my gosh. He grabs me. We went to the clinic. And in the meantime, some workers, they heard what happened and they went and they found the tip of my finger on the ground. And they put it in a Ziploc bag with ice and it had blue nail. I painted my nails blue. So they bring it to the clinic and the doctor's looking at my hand and he's like, there's nothing I can do for you. You got to go into surgery. They're going to have to shave the bone down and close up the tip. And then they come in, knock on the door. They've got this little Ziploc bag with the tip of my finger. Amazing. And so he was so excited. He was like, this is amazing. So he freezes it and he sews the tip of my finger on. And he's like, we'll have to keep an eye on it because it might die because you don't know if the blood flow is going to come back to it. And so it did turn black and I did have to go into surgery where they just kind of debrided it, took the dead skin off. Oh, but so now it's a little bit shorter than the other one. People make fun of me. Call me stubby.
Oh,
I don't know.
That's why you're in charge of our safety here.
I know. It's true. I know. It's my good party story. So
you don't have any bad press stories really yet. We'll get into it in a minute, but now that you run a press.
I lost my fingernail, but
okay.
From stamping.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll get into some of those.
Yes.
It's really embarrassing.
We have to come back to that.
Okay.
When it's her turn, we touch on it again.
Yeah.
Okay, so you lost up your finger, and that was your last day. You were done with that.
Yeah, which actually kind of worked out great because then I got WCB, so I got some money out of it.
Yeah.
And then, yeah. But.
And then, so at what point, because you then pursued nursing too.
Yeah.
So when in the story was that?
So that would have been, so after that I went back to Cape and I met Dustin. He and I started dating the end of that year. I moved to Edmonton and I didn't start nursing until... I think I worked at a coffee shop for the first 6 months and then I did my LPN, my licensed practical nursing. This is very Coles Notes condensed version. And then Dustin and I well, first I was working as a nurse in maternity, which I loved. It was great. And then we ended up moving to Grand Prairie, and he did a semester of school there. Oh man, we've moved so many places from there.
Is it 10 or 12 places?
Well,
It's
it was like the same place a bunch of times.
okay.
So and then we started having kids. So we had like kids pretty much 6 months after we got pregnant, 6 months after we got married. And then we had like 2 kids right in a row, 3 pretty much. Okay, so we went from Edmonton to Grand Prairie to Summerland or Silver Creek, Summerland. And then we were there for like 5 years. Then we moved back to Lethbridge. And then
It was in that 5-year stint that Dustin and I started Akribis Construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
kind of putting those pieces together.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you guys headed off after 5 years.
Back to Lethbridge for a few years.
Yep.
A couple years we ran our photography business.
Yep.
And then we moved to Pender Island, one of the southern Gulf Islands, and worked at camp there for 5 years. And then moved back to Lethbridge for another 4 or 5. And then I'm looking at Dustin's off screen. And then here. So,
Right.
yeah. I mean, that's like very condensed 20
Yep.
years. And
Yeah, for
we
sure.
have 4 kids. And
Okay. So that
Yeah.
kind of brings us up to current time.
Yeah. Yeah. So from my last sort of previous career before Akribis was I was working at a gym as a nutrition and fitness
Right.
coach.
And how long did you do that?
3 years, I think I was there.
Right. And to become a
boot camp.
nutritionist, like what
Yeah,
what
I
does
did
that
like
take?
an online certification. So there's like
Okay.
different like tiers of nutrition. So you can be like a registered dietitian, like you have your degree, you're kind of like the highest level of nutrition. And then mine is more so just like an online course. So it's like
Okay.
more sports and like fitness nutrition. So
Yeah.
I couldn't like diagnose anybody with diabetes and treat them for that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So there's like different scopes of practice.
Yeah.
So-
Which has been cool too, because then, currently my home, so I've got a home gym, which was the original Akribis Leather shop. Once we moved to this building, then we turned that into a home gym, which now you kind of run a class-ish
yeah. Yeah.
with her husband, Dustin, and my wife, Tiana. So the 3 of them do
Yeah.
3 days a week, 3.
Yeah. Yeah.
4
3,
sometimes.
4 sometimes like
Yeah.
a functional strength program.
Yeah.
We
And that's, you guys have been doing that for over a year?
now. Yep.
Which is awesome. So
Yeah,
it's cool because
thanks.
then I spend my own time in there, and then Christy's coached me a bit with diet and nutrition a bit over the last few years, and that's been super fun. It's been really cool. Okay, awesome. So that kind of brings us up to the start of Akribis anyway, from your history. So let's jump into Erin's background, which is interesting too, because as we were just kind of talking about this before we got started, I'd forgot about a bunch of the connections
Yeah.
that we had before you started on with us in 2020.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking
we
how,
probably met like 13 years ago.
yeah, and that would have been through Sean, right?
Yeah.
So when I was framing, I'm trying to think when Sean ended up being on a lot of our jobs. So,
When he was with Ken.
okay, because he was a plumber. Okay, so let's
Yeah.
go back to that. So Erin's partner from years ago was a fellow named Sean who ran a plumbing company, and he was with Ken.
He was with Ken.
before he went out on his own.
Yeah.
And that was with Rivendell, I think, back in the beginning. Ken was doing
Yeah, I
some
think
plumbing
so,
for
yeah.
him. And so yeah, I got to know Sean pretty well. And I remember him being someone who started early, like
Oh, yeah.
stupid, crazy
Yeah.
early.
Crazy hours. Like yeah.
So
Like, he
as
was like the tradesman of tradesmen.
yeah,
Like,
and that's what we'll
definitely.
talk about a bit too, is that
Yeah.
you guys are both tradesmen's wives.
Yeah.
So you've kind
Yeah,
of
for 20
seen,
years.
as much as we've talked about, Brad and Dustin and I've done these other episodes talking about our building, you guys have been on the
Yeah.
other side, dealing with family and husbands coming home that are exhausted and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with Sean. So then when was our first connection?
So we moved out to Summerland. Like we had lived in Penticton, and then we really wanted property, and we found property out in Summerland, and we decided to build. And so you were the framing company. Because Sean
Mhm.
was like, I work with these framers. They're amazing. Like they're going to be who frames the house for us. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, cool.
Hmm.
And then I was a stay-at-home mom at the time. So I was always kind of around because we lived in a little tiny trailer, like a camping trailer on the property, because we literally tore down the house that was on the property and then was going to build a new house on there. So I lived in this little camping trailer with our daughter when you guys were out framing, and we just really got to know each other. I've met my best friends from your crew, like Chad and Chandel and stuff, and Dustin and everybody, like, or Devin and stuff. Yeah. And then one day when you guys were framing, because I was always there bringing you guys food. I'm a feeder.
Right.
I feed people.
You do.
Yeah. So you were going to start, because you started framing in the spring and you guys had a baseball team and you needed another girl for the team. And so you were like, you do lots of sports. Like, do you want to play baseball? And I'd never played baseball. So I was like, oh. And I didn't know you guys were playing in like the A division. So I went out to your guys' practice and I just bombed. Like, I was like, these guys are going to hate me. Like, but you guys were all so awesome. And then I started playing ball for you that season and it was so much fun. And it was just like, yeah, I literally like built my family from those people. Like, that's like, yeah. For
Those were some like
years.
glory days.
They were amazing.
So this is slow pitch beer league.
Yeah, totally beer league.
So not highly competitive, but we were in A division.
Yeah.
And I got into that so my wife, Tiana, she worked at the credit union, the bank in town here. And there was a See You Later Gators was the name of the baseball team. And I never grew up playing any ball, but I ended up joining their team. And Tiana, she grew up playing fast pitch. She was like a legit ball player and traveled with it when she was younger. So I ended up playing with them. And then, with the construction company, we ended up starting our own team.
Akribis Levelers.
The Akribis Levelers. Yeah. And it was super fun. It was so fun. There was probably, I don't know, it feels like 4 or 5 years that were just like super highlights. We won the division once or twice. And I remember Justin, I think he hit a grand slam in one of our games to win it.
Oh yeah.
It was epic. There was some great moments.
So fun. We had so much fun. And then you guys were just always at that place framing for quite a while. And then that's when Sean also opened up his own company during that time too. So it was like, I remember talking to you lots when you were on the job site, just kind of about what that transition is going to look like building a company from the ground up. Like,
Sean and I spent a lot of time talking through that because while
building a house, while having a family. It's there's a lot that goes into
because he took things really serious and he was going on his own. He's like, I know this is risky, and you've done it in the fairly recent past. So he and I talked a lot about
and luckily we kind of pivoted because we had everything to build the house, and literally it was like 3 days after we had torn the house down, suddenly he was going to open up his own company and was like, we have no house. But it was kind of like we kind of took a chunk of the house building money and was like, I mean, if we're going to do it, let's just do it now. So we kind of built both at the same time. And it was so much fun. But I mean, crazy. Like,
let's take a little step back because you touched on something that we need to get into with some depth, which is that you had done some other sports.
Oh, yes.
So this came to light somewhere during the baseball time, I think, where it came to light that you had done some competitive martial arts.
Yeah, I started karate when I was 7, and I did it all the way up until my mid-20s. I kind of got sick in between there, so I couldn't really compete anymore, and it was a really highly competitive club we were with, and I tried to do it for a couple of years without being competitive, and it just didn't do the same for me. But I was, from the time I was 7 on, and especially through my teenage years, like middle school, high school years, it was really competitive, like provincials, BC Winter Games, World Championships. I was teaching lots, coaching. Like, I would be at school with my high school teachers, and they were my teachers at school. And then they joined karate, and then I was their instructor in the evening. So it was like weird, like calling them by their first name and telling them that they have to do push-ups because they're not doing something right. And then like the next day at school, having to go back to being like, okay, now you're in charge, and the teacher, and I have to call them like Mr. and Mrs. And like,
was there some good retribution?
Yeah, there was definitely, especially some of my coaches. Like, I did a lot of sports all through high school too. And ended up being a lot of the coaches would join karate, and like their wives and their kids and stuff like that. And it was just like that weird, like as a teenager, it was a funny
Where were you living
dynamic. Then? Penticton.
In Penticton. Yeah. Okay. So Penticton is just a town 15 minutes south of us here. So what discipline specifically was it?
It was called Shitarayu
Okay.
karate, and it was like full on karate, not like judo, not jujitsu. Like
Okay.
it was karate, which is, it's kind of the martial arts that you do a little bit of all the stuff. You do some on the ground stuff. You do takedowns. You do like some leg work. You do like, the fighting.
So it's
and stuff,
quite well-rounded.
Yeah.
As
It's
far as
pretty
those disciplines go.
Yeah.
And then, so that you'd competed.
Yep.
So to what level, and what was your level of success? And
yeah, we went to I think I was in grade 10, maybe a grade 11, went to the world championships every sort of 3 years. There's like a world championship for our specific group of karate, like the Chitarayu. So it's in Japan, and then it'll be like in Australia, and then it'll be in Canada. Sometimes it's in Europe and stuff like that. And so when I was in grade 10, it happened to be in Toronto. So I was able to go to that one. And it was like a huge, crazy experience. It was amazing.
how did you do?
I won the fighting. I never did good in kata, but yeah, fighting I was really good at. Because I'm big, I'm tall. I had to fight a lot of smaller Japanese people. Yeah,
which meant what? Like that there's some stories that have been told.
Yeah, I definitely, so in like provincials and the sort of that level of fighting, it's full contact to the body. You're supposed to have no real contact to the face. Like you can do like just kind of little skiffs to the face. But of course,
you're wearing headgear? Like
no, not in provincial level and
Okay.
stuff like that. In the world championship level, yeah, you have headgear on because it's full contact the whole way. So in the provincials, it's supposed to be non-contact to the face. You can do full contact to the body. But was like half the time a foot or so taller and I was in heavyweight because I was so tall. And I couldn't, my coach all the time was like, Erin, no face shots. And I'm like, okay. And then right off the line, I would just take a girl's face off. And I got in trouble so many times because I couldn't, I'm like, I can't get to their body. It's way down there. And so my favorite was catching a kick and sweeping them and then hitting them on the way down. Cause then I could get to their body. Because as they're falling to the ground, I can jump on them. And then you go back to the line, you get a point and stuff like that. Yeah. It was a lot of fun. I hit it at a really awesome time where sort of that teenage years, we had this incredible crew of like really, really competitive other teenagers and sort of like 20-year-olds and stuff like that. And so we would take 2 full Greyhound buses, like massive buses, down to provincials and the different tournaments. Like we had and we'd have like the support crew. And it was like this, that was my life. We just went to all the different competitions, and we would, train every day of the week, and on the weekends it's just that athlete mentality. Everyone sort of pushes everything so we'd go to these different hikes like the Bear Creek Mountain and even Giant's Head Mountain. It would be like, okay, let's all meet there on Saturday at 6 a.m. and like see who can run to the top the fastest. And it was like, okay, cool. Like it was just all very, very highly competitive, kind of everything. We went to do fundraising for one of the world championships. We ended up working at an orchard, a vineyard actually, and we were going to cap all their vines for them. And again, it just became a competition. It was like, okay, let's see how fast we can do this, and if we can be like the best vine cappers. And like the vineyard was like, you guys can come back anytime. Like it was and everything was always very like, we tried to put into practice everything we were learning in martial arts too. So I think as a teenager, it saved me from so much of the normal teenage bullshit that people go through. And I was always known as the kid who was in karate and some of that. So I kind of, people, I guess, had like a different level of respect, if you can have respect amongst teenagers. But yeah, like it was definitely like I had a different level of awareness. So, which has served me really well in life, but it's also been like a hard thing to deal with too. Cause you tend to notice lots because you're just taught to really kind of notice everything. Because the biggest thing about what our club taught was you should never have to use this. You should be able to read situations so you never actually have to use anything that you're being taught. Like that was sort of our biggest, like that our coach would always teach us was like, it's not about going out and learning how to like have a great bar fight or, sort of walk around like, oh, I could kick anyone's ass. It was literally like, you're doing really good if you never have to use this, because you should have awareness of situations to the point where like you can diffuse situations and also like know
strength
when,
and
like,
character is huge.
Yeah, it
So
was huge.
I did Shotokan karate from I was like 9 till I was 14, 15.
Yeah.
And did well at it, enjoyed it. No competing, nothing like that. There was very, very little in regards to sparring and much contact stuff. But there was a side of it that at that age for me was fantastic in regards to the self-discipline.
Very disciplined, yeah.
Because you're like, I have to deal with this discomfort. I have to like practice and get good at this and like control my body and control my emotions. And then a lot of it was mind over matter sort of stuff. I remember one of the positions that during grading classes, they'd make us stand in horse stance, is what they called it.
Yeah.
So you're like, your legs are way far apart, your knees are turned in, you're squatted down in this kind of awkward low squat. It's probably, what's that called? And it's probably
Sumo squat?
a sumo squat?
Yeah.
From a trainer. So we'd have to stand in that position during the whole grading class where everyone else is going through their gradings.
Yeah.
So you might stand like that for 45 minutes or an hour.
Oh, yeah.
And you're just sweating bullets and it's just super uncomfortable and doing knuckle push-ups and all these different things that at that age was like, this is, I can do that. I can.
Yeah, it was the mental discipline. Like there's tons of physical discipline, but so much of it was the mental and even emotional discipline of like learning how to, like some classes were just mind-numbingly boring almost. Like you just go up and down the floor like punching, like just up and down, doing, and like you're just dripping with sweat, but like, and you're like, can we just do something else? Like it's been like an hour. But it was like you just had to like mental discipline of.
And it's amazing how those things, like those concepts carry on into now, right? Like you learn those things at such a young age, and how to be a part of a team and how to be disciplined and how to like when you're a kid, like I did figure skating and our coach used to make us just like hold our leg up like as high as we could. And as soon as you would start to drop it, I can't remember, like you had to like keep it higher than the person next to you, and your quad is just like shaking and burning because your skate is heavy. And you're like, why are we doing this? It's so awful. You just want to go and like do your fun spins and whatever. But
and the hierarchy, we like, you know, there was definitely like when we would all go out to eat as a club, you weren't allowed to, no one was allowed to touch their food until our sensei, like our headmaster, until he started eating. And he was like a huge talker, and he would go and everybody knew him. He's won zillions of awards. He got to carry the Olympic torch when it came through the Okanagan. Like he's a very highly respected sports figure. And so every time we went places, he was, and we're just all sitting there starving. And we have to like go to some of the other black belts and like, can you please? And so he would just like, oh yeah, sorry. He'd run over and like take a bite, and then he'd go back to talking. We'd all like, oh, thank goodness. And then we could all just like devour. But like just learning that, you know, from such a young age, that discipline and
respect.
That respect. And that's not something to shy away from. That's something to embrace and sort of, it was a really, like, I'm so grateful that I had, and again, I have some of the greatest friendships still to this day from that time. And it's
a couple questions around that I'm curious about. So you won Worlds. What year would that have been?
Like I was probably in grade 10. So like 98, 99.
Okay.
Yeah. For my age group. Like,
So you have a gold medal for Worlds for karate. Is there any footage anywhere?
That's what I keep asking.
There is like probably VHS tape. Yeah, we had tons of that.
Ask your
we
mom.
need that.
Yeah,
we need.
We need some of that.
And it was hard. I'm very. I always smile, and so even when I'd be fighting, I'd sort of be smiling. But you kind of have to like to convince yourself to like hit somebody and like break their nose, or you know, I've broken ribs. I've popped someone's lung once. That was really awful. I felt really bad. But like things like that, like it's like you kind of have to, I never wanted anyone that I knew to see me compete, because you kind of turn not very nice, but then like
you're smiling, punching someone in the face.
Like, and it's really hard.
Messed up.
It's
This is why I need to see it.
And you kind of got to be loud. You always have to make this like, it's called a ki, but you have to like make a noise when you hit people.
Mhm.
It just seems a little obnoxious, but like when you're in the
Yeah.
zone, it's like awesome. It's
And
like,
this is why I want to see it, because
Like-
it's so hard to like reconcile the Erin that I know, that is like the most generous, like kind, like thoughtful human, just like pummeling somebody. Like I just have to see it.
We had a, his name was actually, I'm going to just say his name. His name was Chad. We
Okay.
had a potential customer. His name was Chad.
Oh, we're talking about Chad.
Oh, the Chad.
Everybody here
I think
knows
I think
Chad.
I think there was maybe 60 or 70 emails back and
Oh
forth,
yeah,
and
and texts,
Yeah.
and then
it was
phone calls.
insane. And phone calls and threats.
Yeah.
It was unreal. The interactions with
Yeah.
this customer several years ago. And there came a point where he had even said to me, if I'm ever out your way, I'm stopping by in a whatever.
Yeah.
And there was talk amongst the shop, like, let's
Like,
set
bring
this up.
it on. Come
and
on over.
Come on in, and we'll tell you to come in, and you'll actually be locked in the back with the ladies of Akribis
Yeah.
who are going to beat the living crap out of you.
Yeah, we had some tough ladies.
Of course, it never came to that, but it was fun to dream about. In the midst of all this too, you dealt with some health
Yeah,
stuff.
I got
So what is that?
diagnosed with lupus when I was 18.
So what is that?
Well, it's like a autoimmune inflammatory disease. Lupus works in a way, like back when I got diagnosed, it was kind of like, oh, you'll never be able to have kids, because it takes everything in your system and it treats it as if it's a foreign thing that it needs to attack. So if you ever try and get pregnant or anything like that, it'll like attack the fetus as if it's cancer or something and stuff. And it just made, I never thought that I had anything. I didn't notice it as anything because I was used to being really, really sore and swollen lots of times because I was always doing tons and tons of sports. But it was, apparently I was like in more pain and more than you were supposed to be. I thought that was just normal, how everybody felt after a big day of stuff. So I ended up getting like really swollen, like lymph nodes and stuff. They thought I had lymphoma. So they did a bunch of biopsies. And when they did the biopsy and they removed a bunch, they drained my knees a bunch. I've had a couple knee surgeries when I was a teenager too, just from the different sports and stuff. And kind of just through different testing, they found that I had this thing called lupus and this other thing called sarcoidosis, which basically sarcoidosis is it's like a tuberculosis. So it goes into your lungs and it takes all the small lining, like all the nice, like movable lining of things, and it kind of turns it hard. So your lungs, like you just have a harder time breathing because everything's more stiff. And so it was kind of like, oh, you're going to end up having to go on all these steroids and stuff and it's just what the doctors wanted me to do. I mean, it was way worse than I was like, I kind of tried to follow them a little bit, but it was like, I'll just deal with, like, I would much prefer to just feel like I just had a rough day of like a good workout or something. Like I didn't want to go on any of that stuff. And then about 5 or 10 years later, I was just having a difficult time breathing. And I ended up going to my doctor. I'm really bad about going to my doctor, but she's been my family doctor she's been my grandparents' family doctor, my parents, but like she knows me really well. So she was like, I'm going to send you to the hospital. I don't like how you're describing some of this like breathing stuff. And I was like, oh God, like I hate anything to do with medical. I guess I hate weakness in that way. Like I hate like complaining about being sore or anything. So I was like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Like, so we get to the hospital and they put me in a gown and they're like, oh, your doctor's really, and I was like, no, she's totally overreacted. I'm so sorry. Like, and they're like, oh, how's your pain level? I'm like, I'm totally fine. And so the guy in the emergency, he was like, you seem fine. I think maybe you're right. Your doctor was maybe kind of overplaying it. I'm going to put you back in the waiting room. And I was like, okay, good. And I was just like waiting to go home. I sent my mom away and, you know, my husband was like, should I come down? I'm like, no. Everyone's just being really dramatic. Like, it's no big deal. And then he ended up doing a blood test and didn't like something on the blood test. So he's like, I am actually going to send you for the CT scan. He's like, usually we wait until you're older to have to get CT scans. I was only in my 20s at the time. And he was like, but I don't like some of this blood work. So I'm going to send you. And I was like, okay. Went, got it done, whatever, came back. And then I still remember this. He came into the waiting room with a bunch of other nurses and he's like walking so slowly towards me. And he's like, I'm just going to need you to get up really slowly and just follow me into this room. And I was like, oh, okay. And they like sat me down and they're like, we got your CT scan results back and you have like dozens of like blood clots in my lungs. I guess I had like almost 21 pulmonary embolisms go through. So that's when a blood clot goes through your heart and like shoots into your lung. And they said, luckily my heart is so strong because of all the athletics that I did, that it actually shot some of them through at such a strong rate that it actually bruised my lungs too. And so I had all these blood clots in my lungs. And then they discovered through multiple hospital stays and visits and stuff that the type of lupus that I have, the way that it presents in my body is it's constantly giving my brain signals that I've lost a limb. So it's literally, I'm constantly building blood clots all the time. So I'm on a very high dose of blood thinners and I'll be on that for the rest of my life. So that's definitely like my karate career was out because now, I mean, a paper cut could make me bleed to the point where I have to go to the hospital, which is kind of ridiculous.
And then what? Now you always walked obscene distances.
Yeah, so walking ended up being like my savior through all of this. Like it's the thing. The more that I can stay moving sort of consistently, the better my system does. Like sitting is really hard. Like sitting for long periods of time, sort of staying stagnant is a really
because yours and Sean's house was how far out of town?
Like 8 kilometers about.
Right, because you'd walk into town and back all the time. Like, all the time.
I'd drop my daughter off at school. I'd park at the school. Then I'd walk home. So 8 or 9 kilometers home. Do a few things back at home. And then I'd walk back in to go pick her up and pick the vehicle up.
Right.
And then I'd usually walk into baseball and do baseball. Or we got really into CrossFit as well. Because I kind of it kind of satisfied that competitiveness and that sort of like grit without, I mean, there was obviously risk of injury, but like you're not getting hit by a fist. So
at the same time, like through all that too, you obviously had a high pain tolerance and you're not a complainer at all.
No.
So that's why I remember like playing baseball and you having not really played at all before.
Yeah.
Like I remember I hit a off-field short hit, or I think I hit by shortstop. They got it. And I was sprinting to first as quick as I could. And this shortstop, I mean, amongst slow pitch kind of beer league, you have these guys who grew up playing fast pitch baseball. Yeah. And they're like these elite athletes playing beer league. Yeah. And so some of these guys have cannons on them.
Oh, yeah.
And, crush balls over the fence all the time. But the guy tried to throw me out at first, hit me in the ear and right in the side of the head. And I was ball shy for like a couple of weeks after running up to first. I'd oftentimes have my arm up. Yeah. So I was just worried to get nailed in the head. And I remember times when someone hit a grounder to you, like a hard steaming grounder.
Oh yeah, getting like chipped right in the face.
Or in the shin. You miss it in the glove and it just, the ball hits your shin and drops to the ground. Like direct impact. And everyone's like, ooh, because you're expecting you to drop to the ground and be writhing. And you would be disappointed. Like, ugh.
I missed the ball. That just pissed me off.
I remember that so many times. You're like, oh my goodness.
Baseball player ever.
Oh, I can't imagine that kind of demeanor, from you I think of you in combat sports where you're just like, yeah, I take shots, couldn't care less. And I'll break some noses. Like it's an incredible.
I just was more disappointed if I like did it wrong. Yeah. Like I wouldn't really worry about the injury. Yeah. Like, yeah, I don't really consider.
So now let's kind of get into when you ended up. So we got to know each other through all those years and playing ball and me working with Sean. And then when was the time? How did it come about that we had you come into the shop?
So he was working at your house.
Yeah.
He was doing the plumbing
for my renovation.
House, Yep. And then you guys had just come back from your break because you had that 2-week break for COVID. And so you were sort of looking to like fill up like some spots. And I think you had just sort of mentioned to him like, hey, what's Erin doing now? That because our daughter was in high school and I was like very, very lucky that I got to be a stay-at-home mom for about 10 years. I kind of would every now and then like work at a little coffee shop or do a little something. But for the most part, I got to be a stay-at-home mom, which was amazing. And but then she was a teenager and just kind of, life going on. And so you had asked him something like, well, what's Erin up to now? Like, would
Mhm.
she ever be interested, even just for like a couple hours a day or doing, and I had just gotten out of the hospital. I'd been really sick.
Mm.
I had a blood clot actually end up bursting. I had like an aneurysm that happened and it put me out for a while. I had to relearn how to walk. And it was a couple years of some pretty dramatic stuff.
Mhm.
But so you were like, you know, even if she just wanted to come like an hour or two a day just to sort of move around a bit, get out, see how
Mhm.
things feel and stuff. And so he came home and was saying about it. And I was like, oh, that would actually be, because I'd been thinking about like, it'd be nice to just do something.
Do something again, yeah.
So I ended up coming up that night and meeting with you. And you were sort of like, I don't know what it would look like, but is this something you'd be interested in? And a lot of it was because I couldn't really sit for long periods of time. It was like you could kind of stand up and do a lot of stuff at the clicker, and you can kind of be moving around lots. And
Mhm.
I was like, yeah. So I started coming like 3 hours a day, every other day or something. Like it would just kind of be, we just kind of moved through it. And then, then it just kind of snowballed into.
Well, that was an interesting time. I'll go back and just touch on that 2-week break you made mention of. Because that kind of is reminiscent of the stress I had been in and the need for help to kind of catch up. Because at this point, I was still framing, and I had Joe and Brad were sewing with me, and I was doing all the shipping and emailing and tons of the sewing and kind of doing all the layout and doing kind of everything.
Yeah.
And we had one other staff member. This is during the COVID times. And we had a few people that were closely related to our team that were high risk. So it's like, we got to make sure that these people don't get COVID. This is when it was, it was really scary. We didn't know how serious things were, but it was kind of like, like my mom has major health concerns. Joe's mom and dad had, big health concerns. And, so we were trying to be super careful. Everyone was in masks. We're sanitizing everything.
Yeah.
If you're any hint of being sick, stay home, for a few days. Like, we're really following the rules really, really strictly during that time. And we had, at that time, we were still doing our once a month openings. So we'd take our openings beginning of the month and we'd sell out. And then we had this massive orders to get through. And we had just done that. We'd taken our biggest opening. We had all these orders to get through. And then this other staff member mentions that she hadn't felt good for the last 2-3 days and she needed to go home. And we were like, sorry, for the last 2 or 3 days, you've not felt good? You didn't even say anything? Well, I didn't want to say anything and kind of throw off the groove at all. So I didn't want to say anything, but now I feel bad enough to go home. And I think maybe I have COVID. And so we were all terrified. And we had just had all this, like, super strict, wearing masks, don't come in, be forthright, we need to know. And so here we are having to send everybody home. It's like, we all need to isolate for 2 weeks. Everyone has to go home.
That would have been like really early pandemic, like what, April, May?
Yeah, that's when it was just like the scariest unknown time.
Yeah.
So here we got all these orders to take, to build, and everyone has to go home and I'm by myself.
Yeah.
I was not happy.
Yeah.
I was incredibly disappointed and frustrated and mad about that scenario because I'm like, the carpet had been pulled out from under me.
Yeah.
We had been up front, like, this is how we're dealing with this. If something happens, don't come in. And to know we'd all been fully exposed to whatever she had. So I pulled 16-hour days for 2 weeks to try and do everything myself to get to the finish line by the time that those orders were due to ship out. So it's just after that. People are back into the shop. We're just like, okay, let's try and move forward. I need some help. Hey, maybe it's time to talk to somebody. So then we get in touch. And knowing that you had to be so mobile and be moving, I thought, oh yeah, maybe this works out for at the clicker, which is our hydraulic press, and you're standing in that thing and you're carrying leather back and forth and so that was a good way to kind of plug you in. And I didn't know what the roles looked like yet, like who's full-time. My brother's kind of part-time. Joe's the one full-time guy. I'm in there, as much as I can when I'm not on the job site running the framing crews. And then it was roughly 2-3 months later that you joined. So at that time, like, your guys' transition now to come in.
Yeah.
How did that, what's your recollection of that?
Well, we were about to move to Summerland from Lethbridge. And of course, it was right during the pandemic, like very early on. I was working at a gym. Every gym was shut down, so I couldn't work. So I was just kind of waiting at home. And I remember you called me and asked if I would be interested in coming and working for you. And, I was like, oh, let's just try it. And for the summer, I was like, I had no intention of like making any sort of long-term commitment whatsoever. I'm like, well, and we ended up living in Luke's backyard in Dustin's parents' trailer because when we moved, Dustin had to start his job beginning of July, but we didn't have possession of our house until middle of August. So we had 6 weeks of this like limbo time where I'm like, we have to be there, but we have nowhere to live. And Tiana was like, just come live in our backyard, which ended up us pretty much just sleeping in the trailer, but living in their house while they were renovating. It was like the craziest summer. So which actually was great because wake up and the shop was in the basement then.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of
lunch breaks with all the kids.
And lunch breaks with all the kids. Yeah.
On the deck.
Yeah, because the kids
big
were
family
home.
lunch breaks.
Yeah.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's super. That was a crazy
Such a
time.
crazy time.
But it was actually super convenient as well. I mean, for me, having my home, this new business in my basement, which I just finished kind of this big renovation for and built the leather shop in. And the plan was to be like, be in that 1,000 square feet for like 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like it'll be like, 3 or 4 of us, it'll build tool belts and great.
And I mean, it seemed like that would have been totally reasonable because when I started, we were busy, but it was like nothing close to where we are now.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, given that we were such a small crew, we were always building as much as we could as fast as possible because we had like our capacity.
Yeah.
But we'd kind of like get a bit of a rhythm.
Yeah.
And then there was always room to improve and to grow.
Yeah.
It was like, how can we do this more efficiently and more and offer more spots and supply more people because there's demand.
Yeah.
So then it was probably maybe like a year and a half, 2 years until we ended up me having to pass over some responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Cause I was basically, I'm just trying to remember now, I should have written this stuff down. When I actually wrapped up construction completely, cause I was still at home at that point.
Yeah.
We're still at the home shop.
Yeah.
But what are your guys' recollection of that time when you're both in there and we weren't like totally fully staffed yet, but that basement room is now we're making use of most of it until the end when it was ridiculous.
It's kind of an evolution. Like when I started again, it was just like 4 or 5 of us in there. And I'm trying to remember at that point, I think there was just one person, like it was Joe making the main bags. And so I was doing parts and Erin was doing cutting out the leather. And
Joe and I were making all the finished stuff.
Make parts.
Yeah, we tried to have Erin on the sewing machine. It didn't go over very well. She was like, this is not for me. And I loved it. I don't know. So it just kind of like, and then you started bringing on a couple more people. And then I started to learn how to make the main bags. And there was a long time where I would sew the parts onto the outer part of the bag and then Joe would sew them up and finish them.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But I just remember, and because he would never say anything about what I was doing wrong. He would just fix it for me. So he would drill out so many rivets that I put in badly.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I'd look over, I'm like, Joe, why are you drilling? You have to tell me so that I could fix it. He would just like fix all my
mistakes. And things were
kind
of getting figured out as we went along. So it was like everything we did, it was like, Joe, am I doing this right? Joe, how should I employ Joe? Like, I don't even know how he
There's still so many things that like he essentially trained me. And so I feel like I still am not 100% sure I'm doing this the way that Luke wants because he never taught me. But
that was it's such a weird thing because it was so organic and unknown. It's not like there was like some template or model to follow. It's like we're inventing this as we go.
Totally. Exactly. And so we would start to like implement more systems, be like, okay, well, things are getting made incorrectly. So my question was always like, hey, like, how did this happen? What is a system that we can put in place to prevent that from happening again? And then we'd be like, well, how about we do like have somebody look it over before you like put it on the shelf.
And you guys were all laying out your own.
Yes.
You guys would kind of walk over and be like, I think I'm going to make these today. And then you'd grab the parts and lay them out and stuff.
Yeah. So now,
And,
then the roles became a little bit more defined and developed. Be like, well, maybe it'd be better if Erin did this.
Yeah.
And then we had more time and energy to focus on these things. So it was kind of like it organically developed into more or less what it is.
Yeah, and
today.
you would know what was on the order, but no one else really did. And so it was kind of like, I think let's just make a bunch of this and see where that goes. Like, it was all very...
And through this process, we're refining the product and inventing new products.
Yes, yeah.
And right on the fly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Let's change how we do that. Let's remake that template. Let's order a different dye. Let's try doing it this way instead. Like, it was so collaborative and unknown.
I know.
You know, it was I think it was a lot of fun, but it was also really stressful. And for me too, I'm like, we're putting out a product we're selling to people.
Yeah.
And we don't know exactly. This isn't all dialed in.
No, I
You know, like, we're taking our best stab at it. We're building custom for people. And we got to the point then, when we were fully staffed.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly.
You don't remember
when that was? I remember it happening.
I
remember
it out.
It was the chaos of the
tresses.
The tresses chaos.
There
was the straw that broke the camel's back for you.
Don't you remember that, Liv?
Don't you remember the tresses?
So many of the breaks we'd be sitting there and you'd be like on the phone. Don't you remember they like made them wrong and then they didn't fit and you had to fix them?
Was this the last?
Your last house.
We would just be sitting there, eyes wide, like looking at
we're like,
each
oh no,
other,
it's the truss company.
So that last build. So basically the transition. Yeah. Okay, so basically our team at the time was the three of us and Brad kind of part-time and Joe.
Yeah.
And I was starting to be in the shop close to full-time.
Yeah.
And my construction company was kind of starting to wrap up. And so I had actually taken to my lead hand, Chad, at the time. I'd taken him aside. I hired him out of high school, basically. He'd been with me for ages, lead hand, just rock star framer. And I had said at one point, like, hey, just so you're aware, because he told me I'm Akribis for life. Like, I have no interest going anywhere else. And there came a point where I'm like, I feel like I need to give him an out if he ever wants it. And just be totally upfront and say, hey, I want to just, you've always said that, but if the time ever came that you're wanting or needing a change or it felt right, you're totally welcome to say that. I just want to kind of release you from any kind of like feeling of debt or loyalty. He's okay. Good to know. Thanks. And it was a few months later on October 5th, on my birthday of 2020. So this is now like, 6 months after you guys had started, 6-8 months. And on my birthday in the morning, go down to this job. When the truss job was a pretty intricate roof, and I'd been fighting through with the truss company to get things built properly. And so we're into the roof framing stage, and I get down there early, and that was one of the times I made sure I was in the job, was to frame the roofs. That was kind of my baby, and that was a fairly intricate one. And it was that morning that Chad's like, hey, I think we need to talk. I'm like, okay. And he's like, you know what? I think it's maybe time. I think maybe it's time we wrap up this last house and then we kind of go our separate ways. And it wasn't like I'm done and fed up and frustrated. It's like, it might be time for a change. I think it's actually come here. And I remember we walked to the back of the house to have the conversation, and the house was on the lake. It was right on the lake, this beautiful, super still morning. And we had this like fantastic chat. We were like arm in arm and tears rolling down our face. Like, we're wrapping this up. And it was like this beautiful, beautiful moment. And I was like, okay, that is okay. Yeah. And we had a great reputation with other builders in town. I'm like, Chad is going to have no problem getting plugged into another company. He wants to get into some more start to finish and some more finishing stuff. And there's guys we know that would be a great fit for him. So that was really exciting to kind of see as his kind of mentor, having done all these years framing together. And then I jumped up on the roof, and there's still a post from that day. Maybe I'll have to repost on my social media of me just being thankful for the opportunity. And like, it's this beautiful morning with the sun's rising, and it's like this beautiful light bouncing through the trusses and the lake in the background. I was just like, this is incredible. But I had to, in that moment, acknowledge like this might be the last time I do this. This is my last roof that I'm going to frame, with Akribis Construction. Yeah. So it was a pretty special day. One of the unique things, or one of the hard parts of that day, was then telling a couple of their staff. I think there was only 4 guys on the crew at that point. Chad was going to move on to do start to finish. kind of custom home building with another company. Bryson had lots of opportunities, and I can't remember. I thought it was 2 other guys. Oh, I think Nathan was wrapping up. He's going to be moving away.
Yeah.
And then Nick.
Yeah.
Nick was the other kind of wild card. And I was very clear with everybody, like, you know, I will have your guys' back. I'll take care of you however I need to. I'll plug you into other crews. Like, this was going to be no problem. And I mentioned that to Nick, and he was just, I could see just terror on his face.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, dude, it's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to take care of you. It's going to be all right. And he was like, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know anybody else. And I'm, you know, with your guys' medical coverage that you provide, you know, we've got our daughter who's got like this big dental thing. And if that ends, I'm not sure that's going to kind of rock everything. And I could tell he was just like freaking out. And so in the moment, I was just like, what are some options? How do I put this guy at ease? And then, which seems to be such a bizarre thing to realize then, why it hadn't occurred to me before, I was like, what do you think about sewing? What do you mean? Well, what if you stayed on the benefits plan and you just went from here, joined me in the leather shop instead? Is that of interest? He's like, maybe that could work.
Yeah.
You know, because I'd built this relationship with him, and he's a very kind of quiet, sensitive guy. And so we had this great relationship. So that ended up being this like really natural transition that we kind of came up with all of a sudden. Within like a couple of days, it was decided, okay, we'll wrap up this house.
Yeah.
And then you come and join full-time in the leather shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was just incredible.
Nick was just telling me the other day, he's like, I've been with Akribis almost 5 years.
Yeah.
Which I was like, wait, I was at, and then I remembered he did framing first. So he's technically.
Yeah. So then he came in. So that was kind of our full complement, I think, in the leather shop. Then was you guys and me and Nick and Joe.
Yeah.
So it's 5 of us.
Yeah.
And now like every station is full. And I remember like, it was like a jigsaw puzzle in that shop. We kept like moving things around to try and find room for everything. And we're trying to continue. We have like more room for capacity. So we're upping the monthly orders and trying to ship it all out and me take it down in my pickup truck and all that messing around. And all of a sudden we're like, this is getting really crowded. Like it's hard to move around in here anymore.
Oh yeah, you start to feel like you were almost being buried. There was like boxes and like just shelves being added and just parts everywhere.
It was bizarre how much we fit in there.
Sometimes when I'm in the gym in the morning, I'm like, I cannot
I know.
we were in that space.
Looking at what we have now, and sometimes I feel like, where are we going to put something here? And I'm like, wait.
Yeah. It's crazy.
We can figure it out.
It is crazy.
So I think it was after, I don't know, maybe 6 months of us all being in there and like being like, we're at the limits of this space. And now I'm actually taking over my garage to do, I had another station in there and I'm doing work in the garage. Like now I'm taking over my personal space. Pallets of leather. I'm like, we need to upscale. You know, that was where we just kind of started to bump up against those barriers of growth where, you know, now we're on septic field up there and I had built a bathroom in upstairs that we could use. And now we're coming up with, you know, there's 5 of us coming up to do lunches and coffees into my personal space. And we've got people wanting to come over and buy in person. They're coming to my house. Like all of a sudden, like this is becoming unprofessional. There needs to be some kind of boundaries here. So it's a kind of a weird time where it just kind of grew to a point where there's now a boundary, a barrier we have to break through, which is when we started looking for a property. So that whole thought too, okay, if I'm going to do a property and we want to get into another facility, what would that look like? What's the ideal scenario? Location, square footage, what would that look like? So I remember it kind of being a little bit disappointing having to consider that. It was like this mixed bag of like anticipation and excitement and something fresh and new mixed with this, like, if I'm going to actually entertain this idea, I have to acknowledge that our current reality, which we had basically built out that room, it was functional, it was working, we're just maintaining it. It's like, this is great. It's all controllable. There's no surprises. We have a great system, good people. It's consistent, reliable. It's safe and it's known. It was great. It was like a bit of a breather for like a year.
It was like, this is our capacity. We know what it is. We can operate within this.
I think we all went through that too. When you were talking about getting it, we were all like, what's that going to look like?
I know.
Like we were all so
I don't know if I can
there.
make any more things.
And then and with the crew, because then you talked about expanding the crew too. And we're like, but we
Mhm.
love our little family
Yeah.
here. Like,
yeah.
So there was a point where it felt safe and consistent and reliable. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
And so to entertain changing it and upending the whole thing is like, oh my goodness, it's been such a journey to get to here.
Yeah.
And now this next step is going to throw it all into the deep end and we're kind of starting all over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a hard thing to kind of consider because
Yeah.
I'd finished off basically my renovation. We had full complement of staff and things were good. But things had so much potential to grow. And I'm like, in order for me, there comes a point where I want to keep boundaries and barriers on the business. So it only grows to a certain degree. We offer a reasonable volume of product to satisfy the demand. I don't want to be in these, this giant industrial warehouse where we've got 50 people and we're like
and
pushing
everything's
it.
automated and
No interest in that.
Yeah.
But I was unsettled with the reality of like, there's a bigger need than what we can supply here. We could offer more and still control it and do this really well.
Yeah.
And that
work-life
acknowledgement.
balance too.
Yeah.
Like it was becoming on top of each other and getting so muddied and
So that moment to kind of acknowledge that's a reality. Okay, then what is the next phase? What's the next season? What does that look like? How do we engage that? So of course, I go on the hunt and, for a year and a half, basically until we find this facility. And then, renovate the whole thing and everything else. So I've kind of talked through that story from my perspective in other episodes. But for you guys, I'm kind of curious what that looked like, because I've went from framing to then being in a leather shop full time with you guys, kind of fleshing out that whole scenario, to then start to become absent again as I'm working on this building and changing that over. So what was that like for you guys to kind of witness?
I think it was good. Like we definitely needed to, like I remember being in here when it was just in the front room too. And you and I working late one day, I think you were away and it was just you and I. And we were kind of talking about starting to have like specific like bag sewers and like a shipping department, like kind of like departments and sort of what that's going to look like as we move into like the full shop and sort of, getting more of a streamlined approach to it all of like, okay, and what does training look? Because even up until then, anyone new who came onto the company was through someone who already worked there. So it was like, well, my girlfriend's going to start working here. And it's like, everything was still very, I don't know, just
really organic then.
Yeah, just very organic and friendly and stuff like that. But it was kind of like, oh, sure, try it that way. Or, oh, yeah, you can try over here. Do kind of things like that. But to get like, okay, how do we sort of transition into a more like...
Was it exciting?
Yeah.
Was it
was
exciting?
really exciting.
It's been exciting. And I think for me, it's been interesting because like I said earlier, I didn't necessarily come on to Akribis with the intention of being here as long as I have been. And I think part of it is, I think there's a few different reasons. I think I was more burnt out than I realized from my past job. And I think Akribis gave me like a really, I don't know, almost like a restful, like I could show it, like the hours were very set. I wasn't working weekends or evenings. It afforded me the opportunity to be present with my husband and my kids. The job was really satisfying. It was like, this is your task. This is your stack of things to do. It was very tangible. It was like, I could see the products being made. I could know I was doing a good job. So I think it gave me so much more than I even realized I needed at the time. But it was funny because I took so much of my identity in what I was doing before that it was like kind of having to let go of like a bit of that pride, like, oh, like this was like this really cool career that I had, even though it was like totally burning me out. And now people would ask me what I do. And I was like, well, I sew tool belts. And they're like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean you sew tool belts? So it was just kind of like, yeah, but it's actually really cool. And I remember it was pretty early on, like it was still in the summer. And someone had approached me about doing some like consultation or coaching, like nutrition stuff. And I was kind of considering, I was like, do I want to sort of like start to pursue that again? Or do I want to maybe make more of a commitment to Akribis? And I think I was just working with you, Luke, and I kind of asked you, I was like, maybe I should just see like where does he even see me in this company? Because it was still like I could sense that it was growing and it was moving in a direction. And I think I asked you, like, where do you see me in this company in the future? And maybe, I don't know if you remember this, but you do. Yeah. You were like, all the way to the top. And I was like, I didn't know what that meant, but I don't know, just the fact that you believed in me and that you saw a future for me. I was like, you know what? Like, I think considering that, like, the satisfaction and the rest that I felt like I was getting in the job, I'm like, I'm just gonna commit and see where it goes. Like, let's just play it out and see. And I was enjoying everybody that I was working with. So it's been kind of like, I'm here for the ride. Like, let's just see where this thing goes. I'm just gonna keep working hard. We're gonna enjoy it.
There's that transition of working in the basement sort of as almost like a rest stop.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like I'll go there and see what it's like and stuff like that, but still sort of thinking like, what does my life look like moving forward? What career do I want? Blah, blah, blah. To all of a sudden, I still remember touring this place the first time when the other guy was still in here.
Right. Explain that a little bit.
That was it was like walking into, like, we literally were 100% sure there must be dead bodies buried somewhere in this. And that little weird little shed thing that was all completely padlocked out and you couldn't even see in the windows. I'm like, there is dead bodies. Like, I swear. We all listened to way too many true crime podcasts too at the time. So we were like, for sure, under this floorboard, there's something.
And they were hung on hooks. And
there was that weird
thing, I know.
machine thing. Like, that's where he dries out their corpses. And then he uses their bones.
Post those videos from when you first.
It was scary, but
the
at the
time,
but like,
it was a sketchy looking area.
Yeah, you walking us through and like, I'm so bad at looking at a place and sort of seeing what
potential.
I just see what it is and I'm like, ugh. But you were like talking us through how you saw everything. And it was like, for me, it was that moment of like, oh no, this is like my career now. Like it was like it transitioned from like, oh yeah, no, I'm here. And I think that's when I started doing full time because I still don't think I was really full time and stuff. And and then for me, it was the environment, the people. Like, that was like a huge,
And it's one of those things where I don't think, especially for people who are maybe right out of high school, because we have a lot of students that come and work with us, like it's almost like you can't get them to see, like, you don't know yet how great this is. Like you have to go for a few decades and work other places first before you really know what a gift it is to work in an environment where it is as special as it is.
To genuinely wake up for me, especially like long weekends, I'm like, oh, great. 3 days off. Yeah. Yay. Like for me, like knowing, waking up in the morning and
here.
Oh, I would 100% just live here. I'm like, oh, this kitchen's nicer than my kitchen. Like, I like this place. Yeah. Just to coming here. It's a family. This is like the foundation of which is so funny because even from your baseball team, like Chad and those guys, those are my best friends, like lifelong family friends, best friends. We've gone through all these big life transitions together. Yeah. I'm like, something about Luke. He brings me my family members. He brings me my friends.
Take it away.
Like,
it's interesting when you talk about that conversation.
Yeah.
When you asked me what my thoughts for you were, and I had been for weeks thinking about, man, what could this be? Because at that point, I saw the need for another facility, and like this sort of thing, this kind of growth only happens with the right people. And I know and have the right people if they're willing to kind of allow me to present it to them and be on the journey. And there's a side of it to me I was really excited about, you guys being able to be a part of the building of this thing. It's like, hey, everybody, this is something we can all do together.
Yeah.
This is this ride that we're on, and I want to be a good steward of the opportunities, and I want to share that. And this is where I could maybe see it going. So when you kind of presented that to me, I'm like, oh, I know you well enough to see the value in your personality and work ethic, that you'd be like one of those integral key people that would be an anchor to the company. And then for Erin, for that to work out to be kind of the same sort of thing where like, here's somebody who needs the work. It's interesting. It suits their lifestyle and even the mobility side of things for you to be up and around.
To feel productive again was huge for me.
I bet.
Oh, yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, kind of gallop through that a little bit. We basically end up getting into the shop. We move into this room, this 1,000 square feet from my home shop. I remember emptying the home shop and being dumbfounded how much stuff we had fit into that space.
I know.
Yeah,
It was
crazy.
ridiculous. And then basically we get into here. I just gutted this room. We got it functional. It looked like crap, but it was functional.
Yeah.
And your clicker was right over there.
Yeah, it was
and
right
then
at the
I
door
started
there.
gutting, the back 3,500 square feet and building in the bays and all the different spaces. So we kind of went through this whole phase of kind of holding fast in this room while I was kind of preparing the back end. And then once that became available and operational, kind of one bay at a time of these kind of 4 bays, I ended up kind of combining them all. Then it became this kind of new exciting phase where I'm like, we need a person to like manage this area.
Yeah.
Now we actually have to start building these departments. And at this point, I'm trying to remember I think at that point I was still doing all the shipping with Nick's assistance.
Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
So I was still doing all the emailing. I was doing all the design stuff. I was doing all the shipping. We didn't have these other departments yet. So the first area that was ready was this room right on this side of the wall, which is where we had the cutting presses, the leather storage, the layout table. And that's where I started thinking, okay, this could actually be Erin's domain. This is like her little space.
Yeah.
Not so little.
The
It's
metal
like,
room. Yeah.
yeah, the metalwork area and this whole layout area. So that was kind of the beginning of how about this is like your thing and this is your domain. I remember the excitement for you to be like, I get my own room.
I know. Dancing around.
Yeah,
Got my own bathroom.
Yeah. And it was really fun too, to kind of build it with that in mind. And so like there's a dividing wall between that space and the production floor.
You guys made sure I was close to the kitchen too, so I could continue bringing food all the time for everybody.
But I remember it being exciting because I'm on the tools at the side of this wall, renovating and working on stuff. I'm like, hey, Erin, come in here. Where do you think the clicker should go? And I'm thinking about doing a pass through in the wall, so you can like talk through and yell at people through the window into the production space. And how high should it be? How are we going to set the counter up so you like have a microwave and like building that to cater to not just my own assumption of what might work, but to an actual person who's hands-on that can kind of wade into the decisions. So that was really, really gratifying to kind of do those things together.
Awesome, yeah.
And then, for me to be in a position where I'm like, I can try to build this for the benefit of the employees and create at least put the infrastructure to have the possibility of a good atmosphere.
Yeah.
With building in the kitchen and the lunchroom area, which I'm like, I gotta get couches and get that room set up.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Don't
worry, I haven't forgot. I'm thinking about it.
Everybody plays foosball though.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
So building that space and then getting, the shipping area and metalwork area done. We kind of expand and move some stuff out of this room into there. And so then over those several months of like moving out of this room into the back, then it became, okay, we have the space and the need now to have different departments.
Yeah.
So then it was like these sit down discussions of like, okay, here's the foreseeable future and talking to you about, I'm having to be on the tools all the time with doing siding and roofing and framing and all the stuff that I'm doing for the building.
Yeah.
What if I pass over my kind of responsibilities to supervise staff to you? And we're also at a position now where we actually have to start taking on safety more properly, officially, because I had done that in my framing career, but I knew full well we were kind of flying under the radar with this business for the first while. It's
Brad
my home
in his
shop
flip-flops every day.
Oh my gosh, bare feet.
Bare feet and flip-flops.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
So many things. I'm like, in order to kind of do this next step and build a fully fleshed out business, we have to have all the pieces in place and do them properly.
Yeah. Yeah.
No more of this kind of like,
Totally.
under the carpet sort of stuff.
I know. I actually was thinking about the safety stuff the other day, like back when we were in, I was like, if we had our safety consultant walk through, like some of the things that we were doing. I remember when I couldn't reach the top. And so I would straddle one foot on the shelf, the other one on the rolly cart. And yes, I remember that. And it was like, you are going to kill yourself. Like, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah.
That was funny.
Yeah. So that was a big part of my motivation too, and acceptance was like, well, now we're building an actual brick and mortar business location. We have to do things on the level properly.
Totally.
And so then, we need to do safety properly. We need to
Yeah.
have all of our paperwork in place. We actually have to have HR stuff and deal with people properly. We got to flush out job descriptions. And I'm like, I don't need to be the shipper anymore, but trying to find a person that could take that on and know it so well, like that's a difficult role to fill. So like, and that was one where Nick, we ended up working him into that role, and he was such a sleeper. So on the job site, when I hired him on, I'm like, my first thought was he's a quiet, mild-mannered guy who will do anything for you. Yeah. But I don't know what his capacity is, what his level of value will be in regards to leadership and those sort of things. But he's just a good, reliable guy. Well, as I'm trying to train him in framing, he's just a few steps ahead of where I expect him to be every time we talk.
Yeah.
I'm trying to teach him and train him. I say, you do that because that. And I'm like, yeah, totally. You're you're seeing all these steps. Totally. You're way farther ahead.
Like unassuming, capable human.
So when I started passing over shipping to him, I'm passing it over with some grace that there's going to be some errors. Because for myself, I'm like, I don't make too many errors, but I make some. Well, within no time, he's way better at it. Oh,
you make some errors.
I didn't say I don't make any. But when I started passing things over, I see people.
Humble you, Luke. We'll humble you.
I see people doing the job I've been doing better than I'd been doing it.
Yeah.
And it's illuminating my shortcomings. Yeah. And so shipping and that whole domain, I'm like, this is like the final part of the process where we're actually handing this towards the customer.
Yeah.
This has to be done well.
Yeah.
And I was dealing with, when we weren't shipping out nearly as many, I was dealing with probably 4 or 5 errors a month that were my fault.
Yeah.
I think it was 3 or 4 months in till Nick made one mistake.
Oh yeah.
I was just like, this guy is a details guy who just is like a rock star at this. I am just blown away with his ability. Yeah. So I'm like, I'm hands off.
Especially considering that Nick he is like the final check stop. So he's catching not only his errors, but like all of ours.
Yeah. Production issues.
Not very many anymore, but they still exist.
So that was like, again, super awesome to in-house promote somebody into a role that they're just like kicking ass at it. Yeah. And I'm like, if I ever have to do any shipping,
that's his world over there. And we're all just like, Nick,
it's fantastic.
You take this.
I know.
So having kind of given like the whole cutting layout area to you and kind of showing you what I wanted done, and then you developing that farther and now doing things that are far beyond what I had kind of set up. And then having Nick in the shipping, one of the hardest ones to kind of give up and give over was the production floor management position. Because I'm like, this is like my reputation, what I've built on the line, and someone else is going to now be maintaining that reputation and they'll be responsible for it. Yeah. Or it'll look that way as much as I still have to oversee it. But then working with you in that was just like this breath of fresh air. I'm like, this is somebody who knows how to work with people. We're wired very, very similarly. We're seeing eye to eye. And I'm just like, this is so great. I want to kind of cut you loose to kind of dig into it, and I will assist in whatever way I can. Here's kind of the parameters that I want you to work within, but we can adjust those as needed, and kind of create job descriptions, as we go. They're still somewhat fluid. Who's doing what and why.
Yeah, it's still developing.
And then
for sure.
Claire with accessories too, like how detail oriented she is and stuff. And that just is so natural for her that it was like, oh, that was like a made for her position.
Yeah.
Which again, she was already in-house.
Totally. The other day I was thinking about it. I'm like, are we a well-oiled machine?
I feel like we are.
Are we almost there? I don't know.
Yeah.
Pretty
it's been there.
Yeah.
Do we know what we're doing?
I know. 4 years in, maybe.
Yeah. And that's people
At least
ask
we think
me that.
we do.
Yeah.
So I had to field a question in my Instagram stories a little while ago where I did a Q&A.
Okay.
And someone said, how long did it take you to develop confidence in what you did? I'm like, that's a great question. And for the way that I'm wired and the strong imposter syndrome that I deal with, like with my framing company, it was probably 5-6 years. Yeah. So I was like, I feel pretty confident. I'm still going to stay teachable. I can learn more. There's people who do it better, but it took me 5 or 6 years to be like, we kind of know what we're doing. Yeah. And this was the same. Yeah. I still feel like, because it's the weird thing about this business too, is it's so unknown. Yeah. I don't know anybody else who does anything like this.
Totally.
So you're building it from nothing.
I know, it's funny. I think in regards to production, I feel like I'm confident that I can do that well and like I know what I'm doing. But as far as like the management, there's so many times I'm like, am I even doing my job? Because they're so good at doing their jobs that it almost feels like I'm not doing mine. Because when you think about management, it's like, dealing with issues and troubleshooting. So I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I've never worked with a company that
thing.
Everybody we just all gel so well. Well, everyone's pretty much related in
Yeah,
some way
that's
too.
true. Either married or a
but even
sibling.
that can cause actually problems.
Totally.
But the fact that we all just work so like I'm like where's when's the bomb gonna drop?
Yeah.
Like where's the thorn gonna show up?
Yeah.
But it just doesn't.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are things that come up. Like I think probably every couple weeks there is some sort of a little issue. But the thing is that we collaborate, we get together, we have discussions, we find solutions, we deal with it, we move forward.
Yeah.
And what could have been a negative bomb kind of to go off is turned into an opportunity to rectify things, to better a product, to show more respect, to delegate responsibility, to fix the issue. And then everyone is brought along for it and it's edifying for everybody. And in the end, everything's better.
Yeah.
There's no downside.
I would say even more so than that, it's less often like any big things. There's like those little issues that people they're like, that's not a big deal. So they just kind of ignore it. And those little things can build over time.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not like in very regular like communication and like asking like very direct questions, it can sort of like subtly simmer.
Yeah.
And I think we're finally finding sort of like how that goes.
Yes.
Like what sort of, again, the hierarchy thing, like who actually has the final say in this. Yeah. And does everything go straight to you? Or now we're sort of like learning to sort of interdepartmentally like deal with things and stuff like that. And yeah.
It was also another touchy one to give over that didn't have as much effect on the staff and the business that we work in together. But passing over the custom stuff to Zach. That was a really personal one for
I
me
believe it.
to pass over. Because like here's like the one-on-one interaction with a specific customer about a custom detail. Like this is really, really important. So for me, like to basically bring Zach alongside, start showing him what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, start involving him in the communications and bring him alongside and start passing that over. That was another really big, hard one. But basically I've worked myself out of being the shipper, out of being the shop manager, out of being the customs guy, out of doing all the layout.
You're the golf pro. Like, come on.
I've worked myself out of all these jobs. And so now I've kind of entered this kind of new phase to some degree of like, what's my role moving forward? And, I want to basically step into any of those other domains that someone else is responsible for and come in as a support and a help. Yeah. And then the other one that has been the most recent, was bringing Dustin into the storefront. And that was a weird one because I never really ran the storefront, or I did it for such a short period of time by myself with systems I was so unfamiliar with. I've probably felt the least capable in that domain of any of the ones that I've been in. So I'm like, I have just no experience in it at all. I'd had people come by the shop at home and deal with things in person. We kind of built some kind of back end of weird software to kind of get ourselves by. But then to bring somebody in who is so capable with that again was such a breath of fresh air, who's technical, can help with that stuff it's been fantastic. So, moving forward, I'm like, how do I maintain and execute good stewardship of my role in the business now? And it's like, I've got, new products that are coming out soon. We got dyes coming in. I've got new templates I want to make for you.
We've been saying for so long, we're like, just wait till Luke has the time to like deal with all these like little things that we've been like, this is for Luke one day. This is for Luke one day. This is for Luke one day.
And I feel like I've started to chew on that list. Like even like the riveters and sewing machines, there was a bunch of little glitchy things. And I was able to spend, a week and a half kind of working through all the stations and recalibrating riveters and all those little things. But there's still a pile of like back burner, which aren't so much back burner things anymore. They're coming to the forefront, things I need to actually focus and work on. So like I know one of the big ones is rebuilding all of our templates. So for those of you watching and listening, our leather comes in pallets and it's all rolled up. We unroll it. Erin cuts all the parts out. Then I've built Lexon templates that are basically our our layouts. Yeah, that lays on top of the leather, and we make all of our marks so the parts go on. So the Lexan templates, I've got changes and adjustments and tweaks I've got to make.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah.
So
Because I don't think I could train anybody how to do
No,
the
they're
layout, because there's
like,
so much just
subtly
up in my
different.
head of
I know.
don't listen to that template. You actually do this.
Yeah.
But we just
You
lay
have
it
to
on there for
adjust
show.
it. You have to adjust
Yeah.
it 2 millimeters when you flip
Yeah,
it to
this and
the
then
suede
this. Yeah,
side.
I'm like,
Otherwise, it'll be off.
Yeah.
It's totally bad. Yeah.
So yeah, I've got, some new products we're releasing fairly soon. I've got dyes coming. I'll have to make templates for those. So it's like when those show up, it's like, okay, I need to get into the template rebuilding zone. I've got to set up a little shop back here and get a bunch more Lexan, and then like rebuild a bunch of the ones you have, build ones for the new ones. We're planning to, with Dustin, do like assembly instructions on every single product. But there's still so many more things to flesh out and work through.
Totally.
But like the foundation is under it, which feels so great.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a pretty neat place to be in. And looking forward, like I'm not too sure what comes next.
I know.
And not that anything has to.
Yeah.
So we need to get into a whole bunch of the things, or expand and get another facility or any of that sort of thing. Like I feel like it's a great space. The only things we're bumping up against, I feel like now, is like storage space.
Yeah.
Nick's domain over there with all of our product is getting really full. And if there's a few more products we're adding, we're like,
that
where do we?
C-can's already full.
Yeah. So we have a C-can in the back where we're storing hardware. And so it's an interesting position to be in.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the things I know for sure is we'll add, a few more products to just better flesh out the product line. And then we'll refine processes and tweak the products that we already make to continue to make them better. Yeah. I think is what's moving forward.
A couple more people would be great.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah, you guys, I keep asking you guys to find more good friends and family. And
I know. Now we're all so picky
right?
about
Anybody want a job?
Yeah. Oh, that's great. Anything else you guys want to add, or have we kind of got around to most of it, I think?
Well, it's been quite the ride. Hey?
I know. I can't believe it's been 4 years.
I know.
It's gone by so fast.
Yeah.
So even when you say moving forward, what does that look like? It's like in no time at all, it'll be another 5 years go past. We'll be like, oh yeah. Remember when we did that podcast?
Yeah.
It's great. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, you guys. That was a great visit. Super insightful.
It's been good. Like, it's funny because thinking about, even when you asked me yesterday if I wanted to podcast, I'm like, I don't know if I'm interesting enough, or mostly dudes probably listen to this. Like, are they even going to want to listen to a couple of ladies talk about leather?
Oh yeah.
You know what's funny?
I mean, hey.
I'm curious how many tradesmen out there heard you say 2 millimeters a minute ago. And I'm like, that's like,
there was a few times that I heard in my head, that's what
metric.
she said. And I thought, no.
That's metric talk. That's
sorry. Metric.
Way to go.
Yeah. And to speak to that, we are in Canada. We are metric technically, but our neighbors to the south are imperial. So we kind of have to be both.
Yeah. And we say Z here, not Z.
Yeah.
There was a post I saw recently where someone, I think it was Tiana, my wife, had said something.
Yeah, she said A to Z. And then somebody made a comment about
you sound so pretentious by saying Z instead of Z like you're supposed to. Like, no, we're in Canada. We actually
live in another country.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Super funny.
But Z rhymes with the song. Z doesn't go with the song.
That's true.
Yeah. Awesome. Anyway. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we'll catch you again next time. Thanks.